Hi everybody, over the course of the last few weeks, we've talked about everything there is to do with Domain Zoo. We've talked about why you should play it, its good and bad matchups, we did a deck tech, we did a sideboard guide against the top 10 most popular decks in Modern, we've done flex slots and different builds, and we've done tips, tricks, and nuances in the deck. I wanted to combine all of those into one giant, comprehensive deep dive. Enjoy.
Who needs to go to the zoo when my house is one? Help.
Domain Zoo is a deck that plays, frankly, undercosted creatures for their power and toughness and abilities. For example, Nishoba Brawler, which is a 5/3 for 2 if you have all your colors, Wild Nakatl, which is a 3/3 for 1, Territorial Kavu, which is a 5/5 for 2, and turn them sideways and win. You can also benefit from having domain colors by having Leyline Binding, which is an incredibly powerful removal spell, and be able to kill out of nowhere with just dealing 5 damage with Tribal Flames and burning them out with Lightning Bolt. All your creatures are also very, very big, so you get to play 1 mana negates within Stubborn Denial, and it also has a pretty unlosable combo with Leyline of the Guildpact and Scion of Draco, where Leyline of the Guildpact makes all your creatures all colors, and Scion of Draco is a 12 mana 4/4 that costs 2 less to cast for each basic land type, so it can just cost 2 mana. Has flying, and each creature you control has vigilance if it's white, hexproof if it's blue, lifelink if it's black, first strike if it's red, and trample if it's green, which means all of your creatures have all of those things if you have Leyline of the Guildpact and Scion of Draco on the battlefield at the same time, which is really, really hard for decks to beat. One issue with Domain Zoo is it's pretty expensive. It's not the most expensive deck in Modern, but it's pretty expensive, but it has a pretty intensive mana base because it is 5 colors, so it's a decent collection builder deck. You aren't going to be playing many of the other cards in the deck, other decks, except maybe sideboard cards, but it lets you sort of build your mana base and build your collection in that way, which is kind of nice. Its good matchups include Yawgmoth, Oculus, Mill, Hollow One, Ruby Storm, and Burn. Not so good bad matchups against like Dimir Frog and Esper Gore's Vengeance. So this is Domain Zoo, and really what this deck is just trying to do is kill your opponent as fast as possible. It's playing some of the incredibly aggressive creatures that also have other techs that is very, very good, like Ragavan, Nimble Pilfer. Ragavan Nimble Pilfer is a 1 mana 2/1. Whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, and then also it has dash for 2 mana, which when it enters it gets haste, but then returns to your hand at the end of every turn. 1 mana 2/1s are abundant in Modern. What isn't abundant is 1 mana 2/1s that are not only aggressive, but can ramp your mana and can get you card advantage. This card, going unanswered, is just insane. Playing for Territorial Kavu. Territorial Kavu is in this deck a 2 mana 5/5. Sometimes a little bit less if you're sad, but let's say 2 mana 5/5. Domain is power and toughness are equal to the number of basic land types and lands you control. Very easy for us to do. And whenever this creature attacks, choose 1, discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. So it's not only huge for its mana cost, but also it can give you card selection and is main deck graveyard hate. Nishoba Brawler is a bad fusion dance of Territorial Kavu. It is 2 mana, a star and 3 with trample, and its power is equal to the number of basic land types and lands you control. Really, it's just in this deck is a 5/3 for 2 with trample, which is good. You know, it's very aggressive, and that's what we want to do. We want things that if a creature goes unanswered, it's going to deal a butt ton of damage. We're playing for Scion of Draco. Scion of Draco is a 12 mana 4/4 with flying. However, it has domain. The spell costs 2 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. So in this deck, it can cost 2 mana as early as turn 2. And each creature you control has vigilance if it's white, hexproof if it's blue, lifelink if it's black, first strike if it's red, and trample if it's green. Just a 4/4 flyer for 2 mana is already pretty powerful. The extra text is a little powerful too, but it also gives way to this deck's nut hand. Leyline of the Guildpact is a 4 mana enchantment. If this card is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. Each non-land permanent you control is all colors. Lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. So this is great. This turns on Domain and Territorial Kavu and Nishoba's Brawler and Leyline Binding. it makes Sign of Draco cost 2, but also, again, each non-land permanent you control is all colors, which means every creature we control, if we have a Leyline, a Guildpact, and a Sign of Draco on the battlefield at the same time, has Vigilance, Hexproof, Lifelink, First Strike, and Trample, which is really hard to keep up with, especially the Hexproof one. Really throws a wrench into a lot of the plans to beat this deck. We're also playing Flage. Titan Fire's Fury is just a very, very powerful late game if the initial attacking and burn just don't work. 3 mana 6/6. When it enters, sacrifice it unless it escaped. And when it enters or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. Very good against aggressive decks and very good for games that are going wildly late, just being able to escape Flage, especially with Arena of Glory. Arena of Glory is a land. Enters tapped unless you control a mountain. You can tap it to add a red, and you can pay red and tap it and exert it to add 2 red. If that mana is spent to cast a creature spell, it gains haste. Doing this alongside Flage means you Lightning Helix twice and deal 6 combat damage, and you have a 6/6 on the battlefield, which is just very good. We're playing, as far as like things to stop our opponent from doing stuff, we're playing 3 Stubborn Denial. Stubborn Denial, 1 mana instant, counter target non-creature spell, unless its controller pays 1. It has Ferocious. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. Every creature in our deck should be satisfying this criteria besides Ragavan and some sideboard stuff. And then Leyline Binding is our removal. It's a 6 mana enchantment with flash. However, it has Domain. It costs 1 less to cast for each basic land type among lands you control. So if we have one of each basic land type, or we have Leyline of the Guildpact, it is a 1 mana enchantment with flash. And when this enchantment enters, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until this enchantment leaves the battlefield. This is great removal for hate, and then also getting creatures out of the way so you can win even faster. We're playing 4 Lightning Bolt, deal 3 damage to any target. Again, this is removal or burn to the opponent to close out games. And same thing with Tribal Flames, though we'd like to always use Tribal Flames for a burn. It is a 2 mana sorcery with Domain, deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Really, we're trying to finish them off after they've answered our creatures with Tribal Flames, or again, getting stuff out of the way is totally fine as well. As far as the sideboard goes, we're playing a Doorkeeper Throw. It's a 2 mana 1/2 with flash and flying. Artifacts and creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. So Doorkeeper Throw, pretty cool in this deck. Being able to stop these triggered abilities of artifacts and enchantments is pretty neat, but also notably it turns off the entering the battlefield Lightning Helix of Flage, but also turns off escape, so that's kind of cool. Rest in Peace as our graveyard hate, 2 mana enchantment, and once enchantment enters, exile all graveyards. If a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. Playing 2 Wrath of the Skies. It's 2 white and X. You get X energy. Then you may pay any amount of energy, destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. This is a great artifact and enchantment hate, especially against that affinity deck. Also really, really good against other creature decks. Being able to just hit the reset button and then play your big creatures, so strong. We're playing 4 Consigned to Memory. It's 1 mana instant, counter target triggered ability or a colorless spell. Has Replicate 1. This is very good against the Eldrazi deck, but also is just like it's like incidental hate for things like Charbelcher and other colorless stuff. From Pyroclasm, 2 mana sorcery, deals 2 damage to each creature. This is great board wipe for very, very cheap that doesn't kill any of our creatures besides Ragavan. Playing 2 Wear Tear. Wear is 2 mana destroy target artifact. Tear is 1 mana destroy target enchantment. Great artifact and enchantment hate across the board. And 2 Damping Sphere. It's a 2 mana artifact. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces a colorless mana instead of any other type and amount. Each spell a player casts costs 1 more cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. Great hate against decks that are trying to cast a lot of spells in the same turn, like Storm, but also very good against the Eldrazi decks and decks that have lands that produce crazy stuff. As far as the sideboard goes, Doorkeeper's Thrall is for these enter the battlefield effects of artifacts and creatures. Rest in Peace, our graveyard hate. Wrath of the Skies is a board wipe for artifacts, enchantments, and small creatures. Consigned to Memory for Eldrazi with these colorless spells, also decent against Storm, Titan, and Belcher. Pyroclasm is good against little weenie creatures that we need to wipe off the board. Wear Tear is instant speed artifact and enchantment hate, and Damping Sphere is for decks like Storm or decks that are trying to produce multiple mana off the same land like Amulet Titan or Eldrazi. That being said, the most popular deck in Modern is Boros Energy. Against Boros Energy, Doorkeeper Thrall is pretty powerful. A lot of their good creatures have enter the battlefield effects, though remember, if you have Doorkeeper Thrall and they cast a Flage, the unfortunate part of that is yes, it won't deal 3 damage to anything, but also like evoke doesn't happen, so that's a little awkward. Also, Wrath of the Sky is really good. You can lets you catch up and wipe away a bunch of their small stupid creatures, and same thing with Pyroclasm. As far as cards that are bad against Boros, they can block Ragavan really easily, so we're gonna cut all the Ragavan. And then they don't have a lot of non-creature spells that we super duper care about, so we're just gonna shave a Stubborn Denial, and that's how I sideboard against Boros. The second most popular deck is It Prowess. Against Is It Prowess, we're going to be sided in a Wrath of the Skies to be able to wipe stuff away. They don't have too many threats, and being able to get rid of those threats is super important. Pyroclasm is also excellent at killing all of their creatures besides a pumped up Dragon's Rage Channeler. And then there's an argument for both Wear Tear and Damping Sphere. Argument for Wear Tear is being able to take out Corey Steelcutter, which is by a lot the best card in their deck. The issue with that is that it's the only card in the entire deck that you can target with Wear Tear, and you really can't have dead cards in your hand. So I don't like bringing in Wear Tear. There's a maybe better argument for Damping Sphere, where you can make spells cost a little bit more for every spell they cast, and they're kind of based around casting a lot of spells in the same turn. So if I had to pick between the two, which we kind of do, I'm bringing in the Damping Sphere. And then similar, we are cutting Ragavan. They can both block it, and they're playing Lava Dart. It's just so easy for them to kill it. And then shaving on Neshoba Brawler, which is probably one of the worst creatures in our deck in general, and they can answer it pretty easily. So that's how I'm sideboarding against Is It Prowess. The third most popular deck is Eldrazi Ramp. Against Eldrazi Ramp, obviously bringing in the Consigned Memories, it counters everything in their deck and every single trigger. And then Damping Sphere can slow down their mana pretty dramatically. The game is hopefully not going to go long, so I actually don't like Flage very much. They can also have pretty decent graveyard hate. I just want to play these creatures and gem in and just kill them as fast as possible. Also, we aren't in combat that often, so I just like cutting the ley lines and just having a ton of creatures and counter magic in my deck. And that's how my sideboard against Eldrazi. The fourth most popular deck is Dimir Murktide. Against Murktide, there is an argument for SMPs to turn them off of Murktide, but I don't think it's worth it just for one creature, and that's like it. So against Dimir Murktide, I'm cool just running it back and just not sideboarding it at all. Ruby Storm is the fifth most popular deck. Against Ruby Storm, we're bringing in Rest in Peace. We're bringing in Consigned to Memory. It can counter the Storm triggers and counters Ruby Medallion itself. And then Damping Sphere is another amazing piece of hate. And Wear Tear, especially since they're a lot of them often bring Static Prism in against us still as well. Life total really doesn't matter, so giving the Scion and all your creatures lifelink with Leyline, meh. Flage, we're going to take out for similar reasons as Eldrazi, and then we're just going to shave on Neshoba Brawler, because it's probably the next worst creature, and this is how we're sideboarding against Ruby Storm. The sixth most popular deck is Amulet Titan. Against Amulet Titan, Doorkeeper Thrall is pretty amazing. Turns off being able to grab lands off of Primeval Titan, makes Primeval Titan less of a win condition. Damping Sphere is really good against their lands. Wear Tear, good against Urza Saga, also good against Amulet of Vigor. And then I actually really like Consign to Memory. Being able to consign Amulet itself, but also consign the Primeval Titan triggers is actually awesome. Again, I don't like Flage against these combo decks, so we're going to be taking that out. In addition, taking out Leyline I think is fine, because life total really doesn't matter. When Amulet Titan beats you, it's by about 1 million. And then Lightning Bolt doesn't actually give that much reach, so we're going to shave on Lightning Bolt, and also there's not a lot of kills to kill, or creatures to kill. So some sideboarding against Amulet Titan. The seventh most popular deck is Belcher. Against Belcher, we're bringing in the consigns. Being able to counter the Belcher is kind of nice. They have a lot of other ways to get it on the battlefield, but it's fine. Other than that, we just need to be like literally as fast as possible. We're taking out the ley lines because that doesn't give us really anything. Like, there's not a lot of benefit from the Scions, so this is how I'm sideboarding against Belcher. The eighth most popular deck is the mirror match is Domain Zoo. Against Domain Zoo, I like Wrath of the Skies. Like, having a reset button, kinda, I think is a little powerful. Then we're going to shave on some Stubborn Denial. Stubborn Denial is decent, being able to stop like Leyline Binding or their burn spells or stuff like that. But I think it's a little corner case, and I think just playing the creatures and attacking and burning them is a little bit of a better plan. So this I'm sideboarding against Domain. The ninth most popular deck is Mono Green Basking Brood Scale. Against Basking Brood Scale, like Doorkeeper Thrall, it stops the just kill combo, which is really nice. I'd like Wrath of the Skies, being able to reset when they only have small pieces of their combo feels really, really good. There's an argument for Pyroclasm, but I don't really like Pyroclasm. I'd rather answer them with answer stuff with just like spot removal or whatever. And then we're going to shave on Ragavan. It's really hard to get through with Ragavan against this deck because they just have a lot of incidental creatures. And so this I'm sideboarding against mono green Broodscale. The 10th most popular deck is Affinity. Against Affinity, obviously Wrath of the Skies is just disgustingly good. Doorkeeper Thrall is pretty solid. It stops Portable Hole, which is decent against us. Stops Kappa Cannoneer, Thought Monitor, you know, all those things. Wear Tear, obviously great, having that spot removal. Ragavan just is not going to get through that often, so we're going to cut the Ragavans and then shave on a Lightning Bolt, and this is how I'm sideboarding against Affinity.
Oh, hello there. I'm glad you made it this far in the video. It probably means you're enjoying what you're watching. And I just wanted to let you know that I have a TCG Player store that funds a lot of the content that you're seeing, that in part allows me to do this full time. Because as you can see from my view count, I do not make enough money to be able to actually do this. So if these videos have helped you in any way, there's a few ways that you can support me. Beyond just like donating money, but things that you can get stuff back on. If you have cards you want to sell, then you should email me at justbottingbiz@gmail.com. Put right here. It's also in the description of every one of the videos. We can figure something out. I can make some offers. Having more inventory is super, super helpful, and you get money. And you can support me. The other way you can support me is by buying from my TCG Player store, which is also linked down below and in the link tree and all of that stuff. Link right here. You should totally check that out. I'll send you some cards, maybe write you a little note if I know that you're from the videos. That's it. Please consider it and enjoy the rest of your video.
So this is not what we're talking about today. These are the non-flex slots in Domain Zoo. If you're playing Domain Zoo, you are pretty much signed up to playing these 54 cards in the main deck and these 5 cards in the sideboard. So the question is, when you pick up this deck and are tuning this deck, what 6 cards are you playing in those flex slots in the main deck, and what 10 cards are you playing in those flex slots in the sideboard? These are your common options. You're going to be picking 6 of these 30 cards for the main deck, and you're going to be picking 10 of these 33 cards for the sideboard. Let's talk about them. You can play 2 Consign to Memory in the main deck. Consign to Memory is a 1-mana instant with Replicate for another generic mana. Counter target triggered ability or colorless spell. Very good against Eldrazi, very good against Storm, pretty good against Amulet Titan. Belt's fine against Belcher. Just like is a little silver bullety in the main deck, but you can always discard it to Kavu. But when it's good, it is absolutely unbelievable. You can play the 3rd Stubborn Denial. Stubborn Denial is a 1-mana instant counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1, and it has Ferocious, where if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, counter that spell instead. This is a 1-mana negate in this deck. You're rarely not going to have a creature with overpower 4. You know, that's kind of the point of this deck, is oversized creatures. And so having stuff like this defends against board wipes, defends against removal, really good against other people's combos, stuff like that. You can play a Fatal Push. Fatal Push to 1-mana instant. Destroy target creatures, mana values 2 or less. Revolt, destroy that creature, has mana value 4 or less instead if a permanent left the battlefield under your control this turn. So black is sort of the splash color in this deck. So mana might be a little bit weird playing Fatal Push, but it is probably the best removal spell in the format. So it's not bad to play one of. You can play the 4th Ragavan Nimble Pilfer. Ragavan's a 1-mana legendary creature monkey pirate 2/1. Whenever Ragavan deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and exile the top card of that player's library. Until end of turn, you may cast that card, and has dash for 2 mana, which basically means you can cast it for dash and it gains haste, but then you return to your hand during your end step. This card is, if your opponent doesn't have blockers against decks that don't have a lot of creatures to block, Ragavan's unbelievable because it gives you card advantage out of your opponent's deck. It ramps mana, and it's aggressively like sized. You can play up to 4 Wild Nacatl. Wild Nacatl is a 1-mana 1/1. However, it gets +1/+1 as long as you control a mountain, and +1/+1 as long as you control a plains. So in this deck, it's effectively a 1-mana 3/3, which if the theme is oversized creatures, that's great. However, it's not good alongside Ferocious, but having more 1-drops helps you curve out. You can play up to Doorkeeper Thrall. Doorkeeper Thrall is a 2-mana 1/2 with flash, flying, and artifacts and creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. Very good against decks that rely on creatures entering, things like Amulet Titan. you know, for example, decent against energy, you know, things like that. You can play up to 4 Orcish Bowmasters. Orcish Bowmasters is a 2-mana 1/1 with flash. When this creature enters and whenever an opponent draws a card, except the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, this creature deals 1 damage to any target, then amass Orcs 1. This is so good against decks that draw additional cards and decks with a lot of X1s. But again, black, we need to mess with our mana base if we're playing this many black cards. Play up to 4 Nushoba Brawler. Nushoba Brawler is star 3 for 2 mana, trample, and his power is equal to the number of basic land types among lands you control, which in this deck, most of the time is effectively 5, right? So it's a 2 mana 5/3, super oversized, and has trample, which isn't bad. Though 3 toughness is a toughness for this format because it dies a lightning bolt. You can play 4 Psychic Frog. Again, black is kind of tough, but it's a 2 mana 1/2. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card. You can discard a card to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and exile 3 cards from your graveyard. This creature gains flying until end of turn. This is a great way to apply a lot of pressure while also refueling your hand and delivering, frankly, a actual must-answer threat rather than just an oversized must-answer threat. You can play the 4th Flage Titanifier's Fury. It's a 3 mana 6/6. When Flage enters, sacrifice it unless it escaped. Whenever Flage enters or attacks, it deals 3 damage to any target and you gain 3 life. And you can escape it for 4 mana and exiling 5 other cards from your graveyard. This card is not only good in the early game because it can Lightning Helix for 3 mana a creature that is attacking you and kill most creatures in the format, but also it is a great endgame threat. So being 6/6 is already huge, and then being able to like deal direct damage or kill creatures in the mid and late game is so powerful, and means that your opponent has deciding graveyard hate against you, which you're totally okay with because you're just casting oversized creatures. You can play up to 2 Null Drifter, very good when paired with Doorkeeper Thrall, by the way. Null Drifter is a 7 mana 4/4. When you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. It has flying and Annihilator 1, which means whenever it attacks, defending player sacrifices a permanent of their choice, and you can evoke it for 3 mana, or you can cast a spell for its evoke cost. If you do, sacrifice it when it enters. That doesn't happen if you have Doorkeeper Thrall on the battlefield, so that's kind of cool. So you can just cast, you know, 3 mana 4/4 that draws 2 with Annihilator 1 is just absolutely nuts. But really, this card allows you to kind of cash in the card for cards if you need to. And then if you get flooded, you can just hard cast. And then if you have the Doorkeeper Thrall combo, it's just so good. You can play up to 2 Prismatic Ending. Prismatic Ending is X and white with Converge, where you exile a target non-land permanent if his mana value is less than or equal to the number of colors and mana spent to cast this spell. It's a sorcery. Because this is a 5-colored deck, this card is very often unconditional removal. You play 2 Spectral Denial. Spectral Denial is blue and X. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Counter target spell unless controller pays X. It's kind of a really interesting card that's starting to replace Stubborn Denial because this counters any spell, and very often we're going to have multiple creatures with power 4 or greater, which is really sweet. So you're going to be selecting 6 of these 30 cards to add to your main deck. As far as the sideboard goes, you can play up to Deafening Silence, 1 mana enchantment. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-creature spell each turn. Very good against decks like Storm. You can play a Celestial Purge, 2 mana instant. Exile target black or red permanent. Obviously very good against black and red decks, don't tell you there. You can play up to 2 Clarion Spirit. Clarion Spirit's a 2 mana 2/2. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. It's just another way to go wide, especially if we're playing like the heavy 1-drop version, like with Wild Nacatl and stuff. You can play 2 more Doorkeeper Thrall. Doorkeeper Thrall is a 2 mana 1/2 with flash, flying, artifacts, and creatures entering don't cause abilities to trigger. We've already talked about this, why it's good and what it's good against. You can play up to 3 Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is a 2 mana enchantment. When this enchantment enters, exile all graveyards. If a card or token be put into the graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. It's just excellent graveyard hate. You can play up to 2 Wrath of the Skies. Wrath of the Skies is white to white X sorcery. You get X energy, and then you may pay any amount of energy. Destroy each artifact, creature, and enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the amount of energy paid this way. Excellent board wipe and hate for small creatures and artifacts. I already talked about Consign to Memory. You can play 2 of those in the sideboard. I already talked about Stubborn Denial. If you want more negate effects, you can add those to the sideboard. You can play up to 2 Mystical Dispute. Mystical Dispute is a 3 mana instant. The spell costs 2 less to cast if it targets a blue spell. Counter target spell, and this controller pays 3. Very, very good hit against blue decks and fighting on the stack for stuff. You can play a Surgical Extraction. Surgical Extraction is a 1 Phyrexian black instant. Choose target card in a graveyard other than basic land card. Search its owner's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with the same name as that card and exile them. Then the player shuffles. This is great graveyard hate against cards like Flage. but also like decent graveyard hate. Like in general, it's just like decent graveyard hate for 0 mana. You can play Rough and Tumble. Rough and Tumble is a split card where one side is 2 mana, deal 2 damage to each creature without flying, and Tumble is 6 mana, deal 6 damage each creature with flying. Really, we're playing this for the rough side 99% of the time, just as like a really decent board wipe for small creatures, like for the energy deck that doesn't kill Doorkeeper Thrall or Psychic Frog. We can play up to 2 Pyroclasm if we aren't playing Doorkeeper Thrall or Psychic Frog. It's probably a little bit better if we aren't playing those cards. 2 mana sorcery, deal 2 damage each creature. You can play up to 1 Brotherhood's End. It's a 3 mana sorcery. Choose 1 Brotherhood's End, deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. Destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. Great incidental artifact hate for just 3 mana, and like a decent board wipe similar to Pyroclasm. You can play up to 2 Obsidian Charmaw. It's a 5 mana 4/4, costs 1 less to cast for each land your opponent control that could produce a colorless mana, has flying, and when this creature enters, destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. So this is a big creature just like we want in this deck, has flying, that's awesome, but also like really tears apart the Eldrazi decks, especially if they have like an Ancient Tomb heavy mana base and draw. We can play Hidetsugu Consumes All, up to 2 of them. It's a saga that we're mostly playing for the first chapter, which is destroy each non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. Really good against decks like Energy that are trying to beat you with Static Prism and whatnot. But the other effects matter too. Second chapter is exile all graveyards, and third chapter is it transforms into a 3/3 with Trample. Whenever this creature deals damage, put a +1/+ or counter on it. And whenever this creature deals damage to a player, if it has dealt 10 or more damage to that player this turn, they lose the game. That has literally never come up for me, and I've played a ton of this card. So it's like a decent threat. At 2 turns after wiping the board, that's not bad. You can play up to 1 Wear Tear, or 1 more Wear Tear, excuse me. Is a 2 mana destroy target artifact and or 1 mana destroy target enchantment. Great instant speed and cheap artifact and enchantment hate. You play a Ghost Vacuum, or another Ghost Vacuum is a 1 mana artifact. We can tap it to exile target card from a graveyard, and we can pay 6 mana and tap it to sacrifice this artifact. Put each creature card exiled with this artifact onto the battlefield under your control with a flying counter on it. Each of them is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Activate only as a sorcery. Just great graveyard hate with the ability to cash it in the late mid game and end game. We can play up to 2 Nihil Spellbomb. It's a 1 mana artifact. You can tap it and sacrifice this artifact to exile target player's graveyard, and when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay a black if you do draw a card. It's kind of a neat card because it can replace itself by paying a black. You can let your opponent commit to the graveyard and then exile it when they try to do something, which is really nice. And it costs less than Rest in Peace, which is also cool. The issue is you have to cash it in and then you don't have it anymore. And you can play up to 2 Damping Sphere. It's a 2 mana artifact. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces 1 colorless instead of any other type and amount, and each spell a player casts costs 1 more to cast for each other spell the player has cast this turn. This is very good against Storm for the second ability, very good against Amulet Titan for the first, very good against Eldrazi for the first. It just kind of slows down your opponent or sometimes totally stops what they're trying to do. So you're going to be selecting 10 of these 33 cards for the sideboard and 6 of these 30 cards for the main deck, and then you have your very own but stock version of Domain Zoo in Modern. And we jump right into it with Kavu stuff. Territorial Kavu, when it attacks, it allows you to exile something from a graveyard, and it makes sense, some synergies with that, being able to exile and be main deck graveyard hate, which is really, really cool. But also, remember, you can attack with Territorial Kavu and discard Flage, which puts it in the graveyard so we can immediately escape it. Plus discarding other things to put it into the graveyard, so, you know, we have the fuel to bring back Flage. It's just a really, really potent thing. Remember, you don't have to keep Flage in your hand. Next up, Arena of Glory. Arena of Glory, the relevant text on it is you can pay red and tap it, exert it, you add 2 red. If that mana is spent to cast a creature spell against haste until end of turn. There's a lot of synergies with this. The most obvious one and the most powerful one is with Flage Titan of Fire's Fury. If you just use those 2 red for the 2 red to escape Flage, you get to bring Flage back, trigger Flage, and then it can immediately attack, get another trigger, which is 12 damage if there's nothing you want to kill, and you can just kill 2 things and you gain 6 life, which is just so good. In addition, notice it gives 2 red. So if you use that red, that thing gains haste, and the red can be used on different creatures. So for example, you can cast a Ragavan with the red and a Territorial Kavu with the red, and both of them can attack. And so seeing those lines with Arena of Glory, I think it separates like good players of domain to like medium players of domain. So I think they're very hard to miss. The nut hand of the deck is centered around Leyline of the Guild Pact, which makes all your creatures all colors is one of the relevant texts of it. The other relevant text is all your lands are all basic land types. The lands being all basic land types means that Wild Nacatl is always a 3/3, Nishoba Brawl is always a 5/3, Territorial Kavu is always a 5/5, and that's very powerful. But the even more powerful thing about it is when you have Leyline of the Guild Pact on the battlefield and Scion of Draco. Scion of Draco says that it costs 2 less to cast for each basic land type, so just having a Leyline of the Guild Pact on the battlefield means Scion costs 2 no matter what. And then it says each creature you control has Vigilance if it's white, Hexproof if it's blue, Lifelink if it's black, First Strike if it's red, and Trample if it's green. So it has all of those texts, and all of your creatures are all of those colors if Leyline of the Guild Pact is on the battlefield. So the nut hand is start with Leyline in your hand, you get to put it on the battlefield, turn 2 play Scion, and everything is all of those things, and it's just everything becomes so much harder to deal with, and your creatures are already oversized, so often it's the end of the game. In addition, Leyline of the Guild Pact turns even fetch lands into lands that you can just tap for mana. So you only really need to fetch when you want to surveil or something. There's no need to pay life to fetch. I guess you can filter like lands out of your deck, but I don't think this is the deck for that. If you like this video, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.